Mark, man, how the fuck are you?
I'm doing good. I mean, how can I not be doing good? Whether that's a rhetorical question or not, that. But
No,
I'm
it's.
doing good,
Well,
doing good.
I guess if you turned around and said, you know what, Josh, I'm really shit, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, I'd be like, so Mark, see you later.
It's too easy to fall into that rut. That's the whole thing. You can
Yeah,
you can get into that rut, and then all of a sudden you realize, shit, how do I climb out of here? And then you
yeah,
realize
yeah.
the person you're speaking to, it's too late to climb out. And you cut it there, and that's just the end of the conversation, basically. So.
That's the end. Listen, man, I've wanted you to come on this podcast for ages, actually. I don't know if you backtracked and looked at your messages. I actually texted you
Did
about
you?
8 months ago. I had said,
Oh, my
hey, man, come
apologies.
on.
Mate, it,
And you never fucking responded.
I tell you what, and I think mentioned here before, I've been off all social media and even messages. I had an issue. You know what I'm thinking likely would have happened? I'm thinking, I had a phone, the Samsung phone. Do you remember there was an issue with I can't remember, it was the 7 or the 6, the Galaxy, and they'll blow up
Oh, blow up.
the
Yeah.
battery. So I had that in a while, and it that actually happened to me. It
Oh,
wasn't
right. Fuck.
it wasn't dramatic, like, still got a roof over my head and stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but I tell you what, all the smell of that smoke coming out, you're like, no shit, yep,
Yeah.
like that's
This is
like
bad.
there is substance to all this discussion out there. But anyway,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
assuming that's what happened. But I apologize if I didn't get back to
No,
you.
look, listen, man. That seems like a really good one to run with, regardless. That's legit. Yeah. Um, no, so I've absolutely always wanted you to come on the podcast. I started this in September last year, and working with you, like getting the role on your film was my first lead role in a feature. So it'll always have a very special spot for me. So naturally, I wanted to talk to you, and I hadn't talked to you for a long time. And I had Mick on the podcast, maybe about 4 episodes in, Mick Preston.
Oh, right, okay. How is he?
Yeah, good. Yep. Same, man. He's fucking, grinding away and looking after kids and being a dad and teaching and all the good stuff. But he had some great stories. You should have a listen to that because his tales of being out in New York and being trained by Uta Hagen and what have you are pretty incredible. One of the very few.
Cool. Now disregard the sound as we talked about.
Oh, that's right.
If this even creeps into this, obviously, podcast, it's not me relieving myself like in the middle of my office. Although I have thought about it once or twice. It's an aquarium. You probably it's hard to see from this angle, but there is a bit of an aquarium behind me, and there's a pump that pours water in there. But anyway,
Thank you for illuminating people who will be listening that yes, that's a good one because I wouldn't have thought about it.
No.
And you'd be driving along in your car and you're like, this fucking guy, he's just taking a piss in the middle of his thing. Like, just guys, you can cut it. You can cut it.
When nature calls, you just it's a subconscious it's a subconscious urge. You just do it basically.
Well,
but
yeah,
anyway, yeah.
Getting a couple of drinks in and so I yes, so
Yes.
just for everyone listening, you and I know know each other through your film Weevil.
Yes.
And what was that? 2017?
Yes.
Fucking hell, 3 years ago.
I know. It flies.
That's ripped.
It
That
goes-
has absolutely ripped. Yeah, and when you think about how long and when I say you, I mean anyone as creatives, especially if you're writing and doing the thing, is how long you might have been working on it up until that point. And then the time spent afterwards,
Yes.
and then all of a sudden it's a blink and it's
It's gone.
done and it's over. Yeah.
That's it. It's I think you mentioned it in a really interesting way because when you sort of look back to I look back to Weevil, and then even at the moment I look back to Whale Away, the second film that I've done, and even that to a degree felt like it was. No, I don't want to say yesterday, but it felt more recent. But I look back at that, and that was 2012. 2000.
Fuck.
So I look back, I'm like, wow, okay. And then back before then, 2006, 2007. So there are these, long gaps between, idea, the writing of the idea, assembling of the team, trying to work out a way to get it done, and then doing it, and then the next step, and then, you either have a kid, you're married, or, or combination of both, as we both obviously.
Of everything.
As we both know. Yeah.
Yeah. Or a pandemic hits and fucking stops everything in its tracks.
Oh, yes.
Motherfucker.
I keep going again. Can't help myself,
No, well, let's from here on out we won't tie any of our dialogue into it. It's going to be easier for me to cut it out.
All right, that's the end of it. Just got to look.
So,
yeah.
How let's dive into Weevil for a little bit, and then we'll push on into what else you're working on.
Yeah.
But so because this is so for you. So this podcast is really is and I'll keep this very succinct because people have heard me talk about this a million times over. But it is for us, if that makes sense. So when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening to all these A-listers talking about, their trials and tribulations and struggles and how they've made it. And I'm like, well, where's the podcast for us that's in the middle? And the little projects that we're making that are stepping stones to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I mean, the Weevil certainly for me, is a massive stepping stone. And so listeners will know just how fucking hard it is to find a gem on Star Now. And I found Weevil on Star Now. I mean, and no disrespect to Star Now, because obviously you and I know each other through it. But there is some absolute pus on there. And then to get a full-length feature that's ready to go is very rare. So I'm very grateful for that. So people listening, don't discount Star Now just yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Just they're there. You just gotta be onto it.
No, that's it. And just to add to that, I think I'm very much. I think in terms of the casting style, I've always been quite unorthodox in terms of. There's normally, like as you said before, there's that point in between when you look at it and you say, right, this is what we believe the industry is, right, and then that industry has its associated, suppliers. They being the casting directors who have their networks and with the various agents and the actors and those sort of things. So it's a massive web. Look at it like that. Star Now is obviously it's almost an access to an even crazier web that's kind of out there. So I sort of look at it to say that if you're kind of taking a linear path into the whole thing and saying, do you know what, this is the person that I want and this is where I'm going to find them. I always think you'll be remiss to say, I know these awesome casting directors and they're going to put me in touch with the best actors or the best up-and-coming actors, all of that sort of stuff. And I've got a bit to say about that as well, about the new project that I'm working on. But the real kind of, the guts of it is that if you're interested in acting, you've got something to say, you want to get out there, you want to do it. Sometimes your access might not be as wide as somebody who has a name, who's done stuff, who's got credits, who's recognised in the industry. So
it certainly won't. Yeah.
No, it won't. So things like Star Now, and even I can tell you 15, 20 years ago, like FilmNet, back in when the internet was kind of working its way through, there was some amazing people that were just out there going, shit, I don't know what's out there and what does this mean, and there's a lot of crap there. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that those that are kind of in the game, and when I say in the game, the independent film game, you really need to cast the net as wide as possible, and not discount anything. And I agree,
100%.
And to tie all the socks, I could go on in tangents, but if I were to zero the whole thing in, in Star Now you find people. There's for me three classes of actors. The first class of actors are the ones that they have a view of what it's like, and then they follow this path. There's others that they kind of think of what it might be like, and then there are those that are like, I don't give a shit. I want to do something, and I don't really know what it's going to be like, and let's just see. and that's Joshua yourself. You know, that's like you're like, I'm in there. I want to try it, and it's more about the attitude versus the credits versus who your agent is, and that if you got the attitude and start out, that's key. And you 100%, you know, you've had it, you have it, and you continue to have it. So you know, it's hats off to you as well.
That's an interesting perspective. I think it's important for people to hear that kind of perspective, because ultimately anyone who which is another part of this podcast, is that it is about, at its very core, but it has expanded on that, but about actors who have had to diversify in order to stay relevant and to make content, which ultimately means they go down a similar path to me, is that they'll write something, then they'll have to learn how to write, and then they might have to learn how to produce, and then they shoot the thing, and then maybe they haven't got an editor when they come out the other side, so they start learning how to fucking edit, and you know, and so, and you learn how to cast, you know, like, so I cast my film on Star Now, and it was very specific because there was nudity in it, and that's really hard to do on Star Now.
Absolutely.
And I also went through agencies as well. But it's a whole, so actually, it's probably just as hard to find good talent on Star Now when you're casting as it is when you are looking to be cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, but you had a very unique style of casting as well, in that you were really looking for someone's just straight up instincts, and whether they were just what was in your brain right out of the gate. So you didn't even have sides. You just had an improv scene, I think, if memory serves me correctly. And I actually did a class for your audition with my coach, Miles Pollard, who was just on the podcast 2 weeks ago. And it was interesting because he was like, well, this is actually, at first he was like, being that he's been in the biz, you know, 30 years or whatever, he was like, oh, fuck, no this, no that, no whatever. And then he was like, but hold on. This gives you full reign to trust any instinct, and if it sticks, then you won't have to keep anything up if you get the part.
Yeah.
Because everything that instinctually comes to you, if you get it, will be what the director, you know, within the realms of serving the story and the given circumstances, will be spot on.
Yeah. No, very good point. Very good point. I think when you look at it, that's someone obviously that has the hindsight to actually understand that, and just to add to obviously the point, I've auditioned, and this is just probably my style. I like auditioning. So my just background, for me, the script's the canvas basically. You know, I'll write it. I get it. Now a bit more. I've written a lot more scripts now, but when I normally write it, I'm more of a believer. The person that's cast in the film, that person, it's almost incumbent upon them to give the film something from themselves. And that's not something that they've read, that they've like analyzed the character. Does the character, you know, do they smoke? Do they drink cigarettes? What's their traumatic past? It's a lot deeper than that. So it goes down a lot further. And when I cast, I'm looking at the further. I'm looking at, right, how far are you going to reach in? Because for me, it's a very simple distinction. I know I might sound like I'm utilizing a lot of abstraction, all that sort of crap, but which is mostly. But when I kind of look at it, for me, it's the willingness. How willing are you to actually say, do you know what, stuff it? I'm gonna I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna grab this, and it's like it's killed me when I was, 17 or 20, and I'm just gonna use it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't resolved it yet, and this is the irony. I haven't resolved whatever the hell this is, but
Mm-hmm.
it gives me this energy which I can use. So, a roundabout way, the people that are willing to do that and actually understand what that means, they're more likely. I'm only talking from people, from the films that I make. They're more willing to get those parts.
Um, I, look, there's a couple of things in that film and that whole process that have served me still to this day. And what you're describing there, funnily enough, I don't, as I've gone on, I don't do like I apply a physiology to everything.
Right.
And it is not a memory recollection. I do a combination, right? I do a combination, but for me, for tears is purely like a breathing technique,
Yeah.
right? If I'm really struggling, I'll actually think of sad scenes that I've seen in films over something that's my life. Before I'll go, my stuff doesn't really make me cry. I don't really have anything too dark and deep and unresolved that can fuck me up. Everything has to be completely manufactured
Right.
on a sort of meditative physiological sense.
Sure.
And since I worked with you, I've gone on to study at PEM, which is exactly that. It's all physiological. It's all breathing and meditative, and it's great because you never run dry.
Yeah.
And you don't carry anything with you after a second.
Mm-hmm.
So and there's still a lot more work for me to do there, but it is interesting. But when push comes to shove and maybe you haven't fucking perfected that technique well enough yet, I'll clamp onto anything that I can fucking grab. But so back to my original statement is one was I used to get very afraid of when I would watch great performances, and you hear a lot of comics talk about this too when they watch someone just like Dave Chappelle crush on stage so brilliantly and so genius like that they'll feel like they could never do comedy again. When I watch something so far out of my reach, or at least what I consider to be out of my reach, I think, fuck, I should pack this shit up. You know what I mean? Like I can't fucking do this. And so your technique of auditioning gave me, like I said, that free rein, and it did teach me that that I'm never going to be. You're always going to see a version of my brand, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't have to. There hasn't have to be this premeditated evolution between every role.
Yeah.
And so now I always, because you gave me such free rein to do whatever the fuck I wanted with that guy, really.
Yeah.
And we nutted. I mean, we did a lot of rehearsal and we nutted it out really, really well. That's the kind of conversation at my level, right? When someone says, here's fucking 300 grand, you do as you're told. That's a different, done. You know what I mean? But at this level,
You do what you
I'll always say to him, look, if I'm your guy, I'm your guy. That's great. But this is how I get into it,
Right.
and it's just going to be my way, your way, my way, your way. And if my way is your way, great. But at least just let me try it my way and we'll get along. And the other thing was, your film is the first film that I've ever had to cry in front of a crew, and all of that. And you did this thing where I wasn't getting it, and I was nipping the scene in the bud real quick because I wasn't getting it, and I was like, okay, well, fuck, I better leg it. And you're like, nah, stick it out. And I don't know whether you planned this, and be honest, or whether it was just a fucking a happy accident that was kind of merged with some premeditation. But you said, I'm going to throw a rock when I'm ready for you to leave the scene. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, can't get it. And then you're not throwing the rock. And I'm like, well, the fucking cameras are still rolling. And then it forced me to really fucking look down at my dead brother. And then there it was. And I was like, wow. So as soon as I fought the instinct to run, it opened up.
Yeah.
And it was really great. And I remember that being a really pretty cool little thing where everyone said, let's go and watch this scene back. We don't normally do it, but let's have a look.
Yeah, let's see it. No, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really good to hear that in terms of, there's a lot of sort of, it was a long process. There was a lot of parts of that film, but that was more around that anticipation because for me, I don't want to sit here and sound like a wanker and say, yeah, this is this technique. No, it's more so around that. Whether it's a rock, whether it was something else, it was about creating that anticipation, and you knowing that if this was going to happen or if it wasn't going to happen, it meant something. So if it was going to happen, that would have kind of pushed you in that direction. But if it wasn't going to happen, you were left to your own devices. You were left in a position where you were going to say, "Whoa, all right, where to from here?" Because I don't hear anything happening. So it's more. I don't want to say it's a trigger, but it's more you're doing the work. I'm pretty much facilitating a scenario or a situation for you to do it. And whether it's rock, whether it's something else, it's really, you're the one, however you come up with it and however you move in towards that path, that's, it's unique to every individual. In your case, yeah. So
Yeah. And I mean, it grounded me. It stopped me from giving into fear because I was like, well, I can't. I've got to do the righty by the director, and so here I got to fucking stay, and they're gonna just keep rolling until it happens.
Keep rolling. Yeah. That's it. That's right. Everyone's gonna, But it's an interesting. I always find that, and that's where I always there's I do have a fair amount of respect for when acting. It's one thing when we're doing the workshops, reading the script, really intimately getting into all the details. But when you're talking about the principal photography, the filmmaking process, it's pretty much it's hard and dirty. You're in there. This is what you got to do. There's lights. There's people. There's cameras. And everyone's looking around, going, "Shit, this is all right. I got to do my bit. What do I do now?" So it's a complex balancing act. The environment's different. You might have multiple people, you've got boom swingers, looking around. You've got your DOP, you've got your focus pullers, you've got even your gaffers all walking around. You've got your
first AD walking through the shot just
to make sure that we're paying attention to what we're doing. But that's kind of, but it really comes down to that. I think that is a fundamental balancing act, because there's a difference between what it feels like and what you think it feels like, and what it feels like and what it's meant to be perceived as like. So, as an example, when doing a film, like you're sitting, in my case, I'm sitting in front of a split, and I'm wearing these things, I'm wearing these cans, I'm looking at a little screen, and stuff's happening, and all I care about really is what's happening in that little frame. And the idea is that leading up to that point, you've got enough, you've got enough preparation, you've got enough understanding, and you've got enough, you've got all this stuff to execute, to make it happen. But every single day, every single execution, every single take is going to be different. Because you might be feeling differently. You might look up and like, crap, what am I doing? Is it good enough? Does it make sense? This light's in my way. Has he got the right? And all this shit is going through your head. And that's why it's a divorce situation. I always look at it that way. You're out there, I'm in there, just do it. This is what you got to do with, and that takes a lot, doesn't it?
That's the special ingredient, right? It's like, I mean, if you're a writer director, there is more special ingredients. But if you're directing someone else's words and those words are taking care of you, it is then it's in the casting, right? Like the casting is because I did a workshop recently with Creve Stenders, and he said the exact same thing. He's like, all of that's done, and you're managing all of this stuff, but
Yeah.
the director's work is all it, the hard stuff is done, and then when you get there,
Yeah.
you just fucking hope that you cast the right guy or girl, and
Yeah.
sometimes you might be running through the first day or whatever and going, oh fuck, and then all of a sudden a new character is born that you didn't write but still serves the story and is just as if not better, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit back and watch. I mean,
Let's see what
they
happens.
they know what's going on, so fuck
Yeah.
it, you know.
And it's a really that's a really important point, and I think for your viewers and that when you kind of look at it, I'll case in point example, my second feature Whale Away, when I was doing that, it was that's a podcast in its own right basically, but I casted a guy who is very good, like he's got it, I can see it, and he's battling his own shit basically in real life as well as obviously on the screen. And I was in the same situation. I was, I set up a project in Tassie. I got a couple of big wigs over there that were keen to do it. The ABC, did interviews, all that sort of crap. And it came down to the point where it didn't happen back in Australia, and I had to start again pretty much. And I don't know if I was ready to start again, but I had to get it done. So I casted this guy out of many actors because I could see that in him. And I still remember to this day, we were I was house sharing up in Williamstown, and we were so compressed on our schedule that I was running workshops from my kitchen basically, from the house, from the living room, and he was used to, he did a lot of theatre stuff, and he did a lot of situations where he was more professional obviously, and we're in there, and I knew there were some issues that were going on, and we were going through a scene.
Hold on, just 2 secs. I'm going to get you to move that mic so
Where do you want it?
hit it. Just so you don't hit it anymore, because I'm going to have to edit out every little hit.
That's alright, I'll move the hands. I'll do it. I'll put it there so I can't actually move it.
That's a good idea.
Without mentioning names, and I don't like ever mentioning names, but we were there, and he broke. He crumbled.
Oh shit!
Like really bad. So I had my assistant there, and she, Becky, and I said, Becky, just give us a second. And I took him aside, and he was hysterical. So there was no talking. So I sat him down, we talked, and he was just bubbling up. And he had all these other unresolved issues around what he thought the production was going to be, whether it was going to happen, and all that sort of jazz. And then sort of towards the end of it, I said to him, look, let's cut it now. And he says, what do you mean? I said, well, when we're actually going to shoot this stuff, it's going to be 20 times harder. We're going to shift and change location, dialogue, depending on what the pressures are. And he was, blank face, and he lost it. And I still remember he stormed out of my house, slammed the door, and that was it. And then the fella... that was it. That was it. And then the fella that I cast, Amos, he's the lead in Whale Away, absolute, completely on board, very much like, yep, acting and moving into acting, it's hard work, because he's a singer in a band, and he knows how hard that's. So I said it's a slog, and you're in for the slog, or you're not. So long story short, we went through stuff where to this day, if I was going to put an actor through what he went through, I would probably be thrown up against the work safe or whatever. Like, you can't do this. I'll be that guy basically. But
sounds about right.
Let's not get onto that on the podcast. Let's not talk about the harnesses.
Yeah.
and the engine lift and the crane. But anyway,
yeah.
The point is this, that the single most important thing, specifically in casting for independent films, and films with no budget to a very small budget, you're completely dependent on the people that are on board with you, acting, your crew as well, because in the paid world, no one would go that far. And going that far, that's the heart, that's the soul of the actual, So who's there? If that team has kind of got all of that, you've got a really good team. And I'm very fortunate that I've only done 3 films. Everyone in that, all of they all had that, and that's a really it's magical when crew cast, they're like, screw it, let's do it, And that's with you, Josh. Like, you went through, I'm not gonna, exactly the sort of preparation and the sort of stuff that you went through. So, it's hard work. You got to pull your sleeves up and you got to get in there. There's no glamour.
Yeah.
No glamour.
No, there wasn't any glamour on Weevil. There's no doubt about that. It was very rough and tumble, and it was all hands on deck, and that was great. And some people got their noses out of joint a bit, but that's a bit of, in my opinion, a lack of perspective.
Yeah.
Like, it's a fucking independent film with no budget. Like, where most people are working for free. What do you expect? Like I had the same, throwdowns on my own film where a soundy was being a dick, so I just told him not to bother coming, and then he wanted to try and stitch me up for a late cancellation. But I was just like, what are you talking about? This is not the fucking Channel 10 network, you fucking retard. This is a short, independent film with no budget.
Yeah.
You and I do not have a contract. That does not exist. Okay?
Exactly.
Wake the fuck up, all right? So you live and you learn. But listen, I noticed I jumped on your page the other day. You've got a bunch of little things that you're cooking away on. Oh, actually, before I get into that,
yes,
I think it's very important for people, because one of your films, I'm assuming it's the film that you just spoke of before Weevil, left a bit of a sour taste in your mouth in terms of post-production, distribution, and what have you. So you decided with Weevil to really, really be all over it yourself, and you took it out to the American film market. Is that
no,
right?
Yep, no, absolutely.
Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So once Weevil was finished, I took Weevil to the American film market. I have a couple of contacts out there, and I made new contacts as well around, obviously, specifically with sales agents and distributors. My previous film, and I can't get into a lot of the detail around what's happening with that, because unfortunately it's actually gone into the legal arena, and it's been there for a couple of years. But that's by and by. The process is rolling out. And the sour taste in my mouth was, now if I'm to advise anything, so with Weevil, I got offered what you call a sales agency agreement. So a sales agent, they come in, they look at the film, and they say, right, cool, we've got distributors, we've got buyers where we can pitch this film, and we can get it. We have our relationships with the distributors, and the distributors will take their cut, we'll take our cut, and this process will last a couple of years. And if it's successful, you'll get something in the back end, basically. So I've gone through that process once, and unfortunately, it wasn't the best experience. So with my second feature, so with Weevil, I was offered a sales agency agreement, and I'll put this out to the podcast. Given I've had the experience, I've been to Cannes, I've done screening the film in the film market over there. I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks around what works, what doesn't. Who's talking shit, who's not. So it's something that I've had to learn. I'm still no expert, and I've still got a lot more learning to do. That's just the truth of it. But I got a call from one of the vice presidents of this company. I'm not going to name who it is, out of respect. And they said, we want to sign Weevil. We think it's going to do this and that. and he did the sales pitch, and I said, well, have you seen the film? He's like, no, I haven't seen the film, but we have a trusted source that's seen it. And I said, right, well, you've had less than 3 days. Have they seen the film? He's like, well, I'm sure they have. So when I started getting through the fluff, the reality was that a lot of these up-and-coming sales agents, they have a quota to meet at every single film, every single film market. So I said to him, do you know what? Send me the contract. Let me have a look at it, and then I'll get back to you. Send me the contract. It was this dense thing that no one in their right mind would read. But I read it for the pure fact that you got to read it.
One time, yeah.
And long story short, after 40, I remember it to this day, 48 points of very questionable terms, very questionable arrangements, a lot of vague language. I just sat there and I said, you know what? It's just not even worth it. So I went back to him and I said, I appreciate you being interested. I've got another strategy I'm pursuing with Weevil. So they were on my back for at least 2 months because they didn't like the fact that as an independent filmmaker,
someone said no. And that someone is a nobody in their eyes as far as the wider industry is concerned. But that being by and by. So back when I started with film, the distributors were the ones that were the gatekeepers. So the distributors are the one that looked at the content, they could get it out there. Now you fast forward 15, 17 years, you're in a position right now where you've got aggregators that normally work with distributors to get their film, to get the content onto the various platforms. So now there was a company in Los Angeles that pretty much offered the same service to filmmakers, to producers. So if you had content, they didn't care if you were a distributor or not, whether you had one film in the pipeline or 3 or 10, didn't matter. You could use their service. So I took that route. And as a result of that route, Weevil got distribution through Sony Entertainment Network, the PSN network, Amazon Prime. This is all US, so and iTunes. And I'm, fast forward a couple of years, it was heavily pirated, from what I've seen, in really
all through. So you're, and this is the thing I'm going to mention, that in sub-Saharan Africa or Russia or places in India, you've got a name. It's got over 5 to 10,000 views without any kind of royalty to Lipkin Films.
Right.
0. But the logic is that if it's in Sony, if it's near Amazon Prime, it's got to be important. And if it's important enough to be pirated, it's important enough to be watched. So all your metadata, it's everywhere. So there's kids out there that are watching it, and it's got the viewership minus the commercial return. But it's spread, and this is I looked at it. There was in Saudi Arabia, they have their BitTorrent thing that's set up, and there's pretty much, it's all there. In Russia, Weevil is completely transcribed in Russian. Somebody actually took it, they ripped it from Amazon, then they dubbed the entire thing in Russian, and there's a
fuck off.
Swear to you, and there's a gentleman cast. There's a gentleman cast for your role, for Cassian, for your role, and I saw snippets of it, and it was all the emotion, and it was all in the Russian accent, and I'm watching it going, holy crap. This is am I, and it's fluent, and it is at an expert, I speak fluent Russian.
You
expert.
do, yeah.
It's
fuck.
expert. It's at a level that's technically perfect. And somebody spent time and money on this, and
Jesus Christ.
So there you go. Yeah,
I might go to Moscow and people come up and ask me for an autograph.
They're like, I've seen you before somewhere,
Yeah, getting my fucking stomach pumped out in the shearing shed.
But anyway, that's the tangent. But yeah, that's
a great
the
tangent.
kind of thing. So it's out there. It's kind of going to live there. I get analytics back because it's only distributed now in North America and the UK.
How come you can't get it here?
I'm actually in discussions with a company that sell TV and licensing rights, And unfortunately, in Australia, the easiest way to get it to Australia is to make a deal with a foreign licensing company that then resells the rights back to an agent in Australia that will then potentially take the rights and sell it and broadcast it here, versus me going directly.
What about Ozflix?
Maybe. I know it's Flix. And
Yeah, because I know that my understanding is that they're quite new. Is that right?
A couple of years, but yeah, 5 years.
Yeah, a couple of years.
5-6 years new. Yep.
Because I don't suppose you know this, but the next year after Stringy Bark, I got cast as Ned Kelly in a feature film.
Oh, okay. No.
And that looks like it's going to Ozflix.
Right.
They were doing their final run at the cinema when COVID hit, and the last show got canned.
Right.
But yeah, that sounds like a reasonable deal for the lads who made this. I mean, and their philosophy on the content and what have you. At least it's in a nice way ethnocentric, you know.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, it's we especially in a lockdown situation where people are streaming everything.
Captive audience.
Not so bad.
No, absolutely. I found there was a group in the States. They kind of aggregate a lot of the horror films and all that sort of stuff. And with Weevil, I remember pitching it in AFM. And if you got a Lowe's hotel in the American film market, it's pretty much they hire out a big hotel. And all the distributors, the film agents, you got to have meetings with them, and you're going into individual suites, and they're in like a normal hotel room. You've got your whoever the company is. And I remember sitting there with one distributor, a Canadian mob, I forget their name now, and they said to me, they're like, "What's the genre of the film?" And in my head, it was like, "Oh well, it's a horror." They're like, "Yeah, horror's it's a blanket. What kind of horror? Is it survival?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, it's." And I went down that supernatural horror route, and I'm like, is it really that? Is it not? And then fast forward a couple of years, there's a group that does reviews on films, and they did one on Weevil, and they classified it as gothic horror, as in no.
Oh, okay.
It's like gothic horror. So it's horror, whether it's gothic or it's I want to say country horror, but I know that's not the right word. But it's such a... And it got me thinking, the segment is so narrow, right? I think it was gothic or country or... It'll come to me. And I thought, is this even a thing? So
Rural horror.
Yes, that's it. Rural horror. That's the one. That's it. And I Googled it. And I Googled rural horror, and it is an entire segment of the horror genre. And it's so well defined. It has an inbuilt audience. And it's such a well-known kind of area. So, who would have thought?
Fucking hell, no.
Rural horror,
Wow.
and it's a whole, but yeah, so
subclassification. Yeah. Wow. I always thought of it as like a sci-fi psychological horror, because I mean, no one knows. And but we always as cast members speculated that it was an alien entity. So I was like, okay, there's a sci-fi aspect to this. Yeah.
So, I'll mention one. Going back to it, and this it never really got out as much as I wanted it to get out, but there was an entire marketing plan around Weevil. It was actually a lot of work went into it, and there was a lot of in North America, like we were looking at launching it, but it was launched off Missing 411. I'm not sure if you heard of the what's his name, David Paulides or someone like that. United States national parks all through the US, a lot of disappearances, and they follow certain clusters around national parks in the US. And they're not investigated, or they are. So this gentleman looked at various patterns around who was going missing and why they were going missing, and the pattern was very consistent. So a Carl, you know Carl Marchand, who's the production designer for Weevil. So we looked at it and we said, well, this is part of what we wanted to get across. So with the missing 4-on-1 kind of angle, Weevil had a whole multiverse of it had its own world, but a lot of time, money, effort went into that, and it unfortunately got canned. So, but there's a lot underneath. But I agree with you. There is that sci-fi kind of element, but at the same time, it's. I still remember to this day. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. To this day, when we were shooting the scene at the sheep shearing shed, and it was a really pivotal scene for you. Like it was, you pretty much out scene.
Mm-hmm.
And
the
big one.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like, and I remember coming down. I said, right, this is what happens, and it's. And I remember you looked at me like, what do you mean it? There's no it. Like you're completely fucking with me now. Like you've screwed me up. Like what is it? And I remember, and I'm like, no. Sorry, my terminology's off. And I could see like you were flushing. And I said, it's not it. Sorry. Because I almost gave the impression it was a particular thing that you saw, and then whatever happened. But I think I framed it in such a way where it wasn't a particular thing at all. It was like you didn't know what it was. The audience didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I framed it to you in such a way where when you kind of looked at it, you went, "Oh crap! What are you talking about? What's this thing? Is it there?" And you had this kind of momentary. I remember. Do you remember this? Am I like?
I don't remember this at all. Actually,
I remember it. I remember it really well, and I that's the point that I thought, shit, I should just,
get out of the way.
I remember that well. I actually do. It's one of those.
That's crazy. No, I don't remember that fucking. But when it came to my final shakedown, like I had not all the way, but I had, I knew that I had a semi shirt off scene that day, so I had, dehydrated a little bit and fucking all these other things. So by the time that end of that day was coming around, and I'd been cramped up, dragging myself across the fucking shitty floorboards and what have you, I was pretty wrecked. So, it doesn't surprise me that I don't remember, but I've talked about you and that film on this podcast a bit actually, because one, it was a great experience, but two, I don't have a lot of them, so I can only call on the experiences that I have. But I really feel like, because there's a lot of ambiguity in the film, and I feel like it'll either be this film that just it is special to us and people in Russia and that's it, or it'll be this film that like either you'll die in your 70s and you would have had this great career and people will fucking blow the dust off this thing in the shelf and go, this is before he sold out, man. This is like some fucking cryptic shit that no one gets, but everyone knows that there's some genius plot. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of like there was this. I was doing some prep to play. The Batavia Mutiny. Do you know that story? And it's Australian history.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't.
There's a film being made, or was being made, about the Batavia, which was a film that was hijacked. Not a film, a tall ship in the 1700s, early 1700s, before Captain Cook, that was hijacked.
The Dutch one, no?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I do know. Sorry, it just
by a guy
came to me.
Yep. Cornelius.
Yep.
And he was heavily influenced by this painter who was this fucking satanic, atheistic type weird
Bosch.
Fucking.
Hieronymus Bosch. Yeah.
100%. That's him.
Hieronymus Bosch. Yes, I know. I've seen it when I was in Holland. I know. I love the painter. It's but
but there's only like one painting left, isn't there, or something?
Yeah, it's up in it's Dutch painter, but he's like the hell and the But I get
so
it.
So there's this like after the fact. Well, maybe I'm drawing a bad parallel there, but when you look back on stuff and reinterpret it and go, it never struck a chord at the time, but now we're looking at it with fresh eyes, and it's like, whoa. So tell me what's coming. What are you up to?
Oh God. I think where I'm sort of, so in a nutshell where I'm at right now, I started I wrote a script towards the tail end of last year. So I've kind of reverted back to this is the irony of it all. I reverted back to kind of drama, but like a self-reflecting faction kind of drama. Wrote the script, and I got contacted by an executive producer who I did meet, who I knew from the US, and he's like, "Look, I'm pulling together a couple of films. We're gonna try and do it overseas. And have you got anything else that's not your?" Because I've got another 2 scripts which are very much more kind of sinkhole style.
Your brand,
which is I'm like, nah, I'm done with those. I'm not touching them. But I've got this one thing that I'm doing, and he's like, all right, cool, let me look at it. So he comes back and he says, right, small budget, and it is a small budget actually. And he goes, well, I would like to option the script. Let's get it done. So the script got optioned. And the film essentially is around independent filmmaker who's, kind of the end of his road, trying to make one last film, but then there's a lot of these other things that sort of happen, and he ends up in a position where it's almost life imitating art, and he is almost the protagonist in his own kind of arrangement, so to speak. But
and the actor that you need is white, 39, long brown hair, blue eyes.
Unfortunately, the actor and all the crew that I can have are the ones that go under the rebate in Spain, which has
shit.
So fast forward, I was meant to have been. I had my tickets cancelled. I was meant to be on a plane a couple of months ago.
Wow.
Off to the Canary Islands. Checking out locations, meeting with the service company, looking at all the stuff over there.
Wow, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, so all that was happening.
I mean, shit that it got canned, but that's still, that's so great though.
Yeah, but then the whole thing got boom, COVID, our good friend. So we kind of bounced back. I'm very fortunate to have a producer now attached from my end here. So we're still moving with the project, but it's kind of a little bit at snail's pace at the moment because there's a ton of moving.
Are you going to try and shoot it here now?
No, it's still over there because
over there.
Because in places like Canary Islands and Spain, specifically Canary Islands, you got up to 50% tax rebate.
Tax breaks, yep.
In Australia, it's up to 45%, and when you look at QAPE, QAPE, it doesn't guarantee 45%. It's up to 45%, so it's likely between 25 and 30% or thereabouts. But over there, there's a lot of other. Let's just say there's a lot of other things that you can maneuver that gets you a straight 50%. But you've got to spend probably about 2 million euros as a minimum to do that.
Oh right.
So
right.
A lot of stuff going on there. You got to use EU crew, EU cast. So all that's kind of, it's moving forward, but it's moving forward in its own kind of way. So in between then, I've already put together 2 more films. Two more scripts. They're both going through second draft at the moment. I've done that. I've actually finished off a manuscript, which is nothing to do with film, but it's more writing. This, the little bouncy ball in my head it doesn't stop. So yeah, no, it's kind of, I think the situation is providing. When I say the situation globally,
yep.
It gets mentioned a million times an hour, wherever, whether the news or social media.
Yeah.
But I think it provides an interesting opportunity for those that are, whether they're writing, whether they're coming up with like what's going to happen post whatever this is going to be, or potentially whatever this is going to be is not something that's just going to stop and we're going to move on. It's going to continue to be there in the background, however intense. But we, from a creative point of view, we'll still we don't stop. We're not connected to this thing. We just continue doing our thing. So, in a really abstractionist, roundabout way, a lot of the stuff that I'm working on now, I'm working on it from the point of view of, there's a clean slate, do whatever the hell you want to do. And I'm doing it. However that materializes in a COVID, post-COVID, with COVID world, that's going to be its thing. So
that's up to the universe.
Yeah, it's up to the universe, So it's film scripts, it's literature, so it's manuscript stuff, and yeah, that's pretty much that's and this film project overseas, and that's it. All right.
I thought it would be remiss of me not to have a wee drop, considering that you are the man who that story has been shared on this podcast too. By the way, Dave was on the Dave was on the podcast and was smashing that bottle of Hennessy and fucking firing guns into the night.
Why not? When in Rome, as they say.
But it was so great. Well, that's really exciting, man. I'm really, really glad to hear that you're that there's some wins happening there. I mean, so one of the other reasons I started this podcast is I wrote my first feature, and like I say, I've crapped on about it many times, but it's a film about anti-poaching in the Kruger National Park in Africa, and the men and women who've come out of Afghanistan and Iraq and what have you, and have started these units to fight poachers with deadly force and what have you, and why they do what they do, and the whole bit. And so I had a guest on recently, Scott Ness, and he's a South African director who studied at VCA, but he's from there and he's back out here. And I had a sit down with him on the podcast and actually pitched him on the podcast about directing the film. And it's been a really, it's a very empowering, fascinating process in just, I don't think a good actor ever takes for granted good writing, but when you're new and you're fresh, you do, I think. It's just how intricate and how hard really good writing is, in terms of just that cognitive structure that needs to be there for a story to work, and the pacing and the beats and what have you. And we had a great conversation, and so that's why this podcast exists, is to build an audience so that when I'm trying to convince someone to put me in the front seat of my own film, there's already an audience that believes that I'm the guy. And also to connect me to people who will help me make it. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. But we're in a position now where we can take the bones of it to someone, and know that no one's going to say that that's a shit idea, and that doesn't have a place, and that there isn't an audience. That's already been well established. It's tricky because it's such a convoluted, a dynamic situation that actually, this is what Scott Ness said today, which I thought was really, really acute and wise of him. He's like, you're trying to tell the world that this thing that's happening, which to 99.9% of everyone is black and white, is actually very, very fucking grey. And how do you convince them of that inside classic storytelling, with a hero and a villain and a love interest and family and blah 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 blah. So it's a tall order, but I don't think it's unachievable. It has to be achievable, otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah.
fucking ain't. So
No, it's interesting. Very interesting. So you familiar with when you bring this up? This we're talking about kind of South Africa, right? Kruger National Park, that kind of area. If I'm not,
that's exactly it.
if
That's
my
exactly
knowledge,
it. Yeah.
yeah. So
The film's called The
I'll tell you,
Park.
the park.
Right.
I'll tell you an interesting thing. This is many years ago now. Myself and my now wife Nicole. We went to a little talk, a presentation when I was living in Perth, and the gentleman, he did a lot of interesting stuff over there, and we went to a pub afterwards, just like to talk about it, and they were all there. So we caught up, and we were there for a couple of hours, buying beers. And from memory, I could be wrong, so you have to look it up. The gentleman's name is Damien Mander, if that name rings a bell. And Damien Mander is an Australian. He's an Australian Special Forces professional from work, like did his time in the Iraq War for quite some time, and then set up a cause or a mission effectively around the Kruger National Park around poaching, specifically rhinos. So rhinos, he set up a whole foundation. So if you can look it up, I think it's the Mander Foundation or something to that effect. But we were at his talk. Excellent, like just the amount of stuff that he's gone through, and we'll just give it a pause here.
No, keep talking.
Alright.
That's that moment you're supposed to keep talking.
Alright, so we basically caught up, had a really good discussion with him, a couple of beers, and Damien, he's literally dedicated his whole life now to training local groups over there, and himself taking a proactive stance and position around poachers around the Kruger National Park, because a lot of the tusks, a lot of the horns, there's an entire black market. Unfortunately, most of it is influenced within Southeast Asia. So we're looking at obviously places like China. We're looking at places like everywhere from Vietnam, Laos, the Philippines, even Thailand, where they're very much prized as far as whatever medicinal or spiritual kind of properties it embodies. So there's very much that equation, that supply and demand equation. So
Yeah.
they want it, they need it. So he's one of the few that's actually, this is years ago, he set up, and I remember we had a couple of beers with him, but he's quite well known in the field. So it would be someone for you to look up.
Yeah, man. Look. I'll take any introduction, any kind of fucking whatever I can get. I had someone on the podcast who spoke about him many times, Mark Diaco, great guy, who I was telling him about this film, and he said, and I was telling him about all these little serendipitous events that were happening around this film and crazy stuff. And he said, in my experience, when you have stuff like that lining up constantly, it's just a matter of time it's going to get made. But if you don't, fucking walk away. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
These things, if the universe is going to bring it to you, this is how it'll do it.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate to have got a friend of mine who actually was with me on the day that I sort of voiced the idea for the first time. Well, I just literally had the idea, and I was like, that'd make a great story. What do you think? He was in Iraq and was going to be an anti-poacher, and then decided he would come home instead and just take himself away from a military zone for a while. And he has now come on as my, I guess you would call him an executive producer, in terms of he's talking to people trying to raise raise the cash and
funds. Yeah.
and where we're at now is we need someone to come in and take all of the notes from Scottness and take my script. Someone who's preferably because female and South African, because our lead is a mixed race South African woman who's got the skills to just fucking pinch it, and make it ready and make it ready to go. To take all the fillers out, all the shit that because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
I've read a book and just gone and written a film, and make it right, But fortunately, the producers and people, like I said, that I've been working with, have said, if you can get that to happen, 100%, this is, and it's an original film, but it's not there yet.
Oh, everything has its time. Like there's like, as far as an idea, that's there. Like, it's something that's you're not just creating something and then saying, right, it relies on this, or it applies to that, and this is what you can do. This is what you can do out of it. You've got something that's kind of based on, you've got the socioeconomic kind of factors, I'm sure. You've got the socio-political situation that's happening there. So it's, I'm just listening without knowing the details of the script and what it's about. But things like Manda, like, that's something that you got somebody that's dedicated their whole life into that. That's their thing. He's a big guy, a lot of really cool stories himself, passionate about the cause. There's something that can be done at the end of the
100%.
day. It goes back to the, like, it's really, and this is a really important point that I've met, and I speak to a lot of different filmmakers. I like the word filmmakers. I actually I had lunch with one about 2 weeks ago, and there's a whole thing around, in the film industry, you've got there's a high level of demarcation. You've got producers, directors, screenwriters, and all of that sort of stuff. And they, as like the building industry, they've all got their own trade. I organise the finance, or I'm the builder, I organise the trades. So it's almost parallels in that way. The filmmaker, in my mind, that's the sort of person, like, you got this idea that you want to just realise. You want to bring it to life, and that's the distinction. That, like, what you're talking about, like what I talk about, what I do, it's more of a filmmaker versus I'm a producer that's gonna I'm gonna option a script, and then I'm gonna I reckon I'll get this script out, and then I'll have a slate, and in that slate I'll have 5-10 projects, maybe less, and they're all different genres, and I'm gonna hire this director, that director. So it's more so it's like a game of construction. You're like a property developer. You're hiring builders. You're hiring tradespeople.
Town planning.
You're going through that process. Town planning. That's what filmmaking is. Actually, it's the oddball in the equation. It's you're living on the periphery. You're a storyteller. That's all you really are.
Yeah, and you need to be across it all.
You do, and you just happen to need this and that and the other. And there's a really interesting idea, like in English, you got directors. Like, it's probably off the cuff example, but a director is like you're directing the film. In France, it's called a réalisateur, which is you realize an idea. You're realizing something. So basically, you're realizing an idea, a vision, an overall picture, versus you're directing of what that is going to be.
Right.
So you get what I mean? The language can actually dictate. Language can dictate the reality of the way.
Yeah, 100%.
You kind of dictate
it.
So that's why I like when you say that. I like that you say that it is, it's a damn freaking journey. Like, I've gone, it's 98% of all of, and I'm only talking as a filmmaker. It is that process, and maybe that 1 or 2% as you're sitting in the audience, as you did in Weevil, and you're watching yourself on the silver screen, and you're seeing it, and that's it. It's 1%, of your time, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. That is. It's a very small portion. A lot goes in.
That's small.
A lot goes in. Well, listen, man. I think that there's a part two in this because I've got a wife and child to go and spend time with, and
Yes.
and what have you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And once this whole shit show relaxes again, we should absolutely hang out and catch up in more
Yeah.
detail, and maybe
Sounds
drink
good.
some more cognac in the
Cognac.
woods and
Love it.
fucking
There we
howl
go.
at the moon.
Shoot some guns.
Yeah. Hey mate, I love you.
Well, that's
I
it.
I love
Nah.
your work. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I much appreciate it. And lovely to talk to you again. It's like, you know,
It's been 2 years.
it has.
Take care.
And you haven't changed a bit.
Except the hair.
Except the hair. All the best.
Thanks, buddy.
Have a good
Bye.
night.